The amount of power we're dealing with is astronomical.
Are we alone in this universe? That is the question I think everyone is dying to answer. Hello, beautiful people. My name is Morgan. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have decided to do some dollar store crafting, seeing as Halloween's coming up, but I wanted to keep it interesting and also talk about a UFO story at the same time. Everything I got from the dollar store, with the exception of the drill and my handy dandy glue gun. Everything that I do step by step is going to be listed below, so if you want to know exactly how I achieved what I'm about to do, then please look in the comments. I feel like when I was growing up, I heard a lot about Area 51, but I never really knew what it was. Well, a few years ago, we were blessed with some declassified information, and now we know a little bit about what's been going on up there. Here's what we know. In the early 1950s, the US was conducting recon missions over the USSR. They were testing new military equipment, unbeknownst to the people down below, and keeping it all very hush-hush, because of course, we weren't allowed to be there. Rebels. So President Eisenhower was worried about them getting caught and being shut down. So in 1954, Eisenhower designated a space known as Area 51 for top secret government testing. By 1955 though, residents around the Nevada area had started to report unidentified flying objects. Well, the government was using this area to test out government equipment and aircrafts, and of course they couldn't tell anybody that. So they told everybody that they were natural phenomenons that could not be explained, leaving thousands of curious minds to wonder. Could it be UFOs? Maybe. So that is Area 51 in a nutshell. But here's where the story gets juicy. Fast forward a few years and we have now entered the 1980s. Yes, the era of questionable fashion, pastels, and high waters. We get introduced to a new character named Robert Scott Lazar, aka Bob. He claims that in his 20s he worked for a subset within Area 51. The sector was called S4. So how was this man lucky enough to work in a top secret area? Well, he worked at a lab called Los Alamos in New Mexico, and he worked on nuclear development, physics, and smart people stuff like that. There was something different about this particular brainiac that set him apart from the rest. He was flashy. Bob placed a jet engine inside of his car. Los Alamos decided to put him on the paper as being this cool physicist guy that drives to work every day in this 200 miles per hour car. I mean, as luck would have it, the day that that article came out happened to be the same day that Edward Teller, the inventor of the hydrogen bomb, was scheduled to give a lecture at Bob's job. Well, Bob really wanted to meet this guy, so he happened to walk up that morning and he saw Edward Teller reading the newspaper with his face on it. So he walks up to Teller and he's like, "I'm Bob and I'm actually on the cover of that article that you're reading." And that's how they met. A few years after their meeting, Bob had moved out of New Mexico and moved to Las Vegas. He was working in a different field. He decided that he wanted to go back into the science field, so he actually sent Robert Teller his resume. Teller, of course, remembered Bob and told him to contact this person at a company called EG&G. And that is how he met the people that hired him to work at S4. Bob would go on to describe the job description as being very vague. He knew that he was going to be working in a remote location, that it required a top security clearance, and that he would be back engineering something. His work schedule was also just as mysterious. He never knew when he would have to work. He'd get a call to come in and he'd have to be ready in 45 minutes. They would let him know when he had to work and when he didn't have to work. He wasn't even allowed to tell his family what he was doing. I'm getting this strange call at 10 o'clock at night, have to be out of the house at like 10:45. Sorry, honey. I just gotta go. I can't tell you what's going on. And that was a little bit strange and stressful on their marriage. This is foreshadowing. Anyway, his first day of work, he goes to the Las Vegas airport and he enters an unmarked plane that then takes him out to Area 51, hops in a bus where all of the windows are blacked out, and that bus then takes him to S4. And this was going to be his normal routine. This is how he got to and from work. One day, Bob is driving to work in this mysterious bus, but this day was a little bit different than most. They drove them to a different entrance, and there was a hangar in the side of a mountain. And inside of this hangar was what appeared to be literally like a flying saucer.
The first inkling I had was when I came in. There's this facility that is at S4. It's in the side of a mountain. And normally we had pulled in with the bus and gone around the front through a normal double door. This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open. I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on. I saw it sitting there, and we walked by it. It had a little American flag stuck on the side, and I thought, oh my God, this finally explains all the flying saucer stories. This is just an advanced fighter.
So at first he thought, oh my gosh, this is what everyone's talking about. These are those rumors. This is about the UFOs. It's just the government working on some new aircraft. Haha, got you, everybody. At some point after this first sighting of this mysterious vehicle, he was introduced to his lab partner named Barry. Together, Barry and Bob were tasked with trying to figure out how this vehicle was powered. That's when he gets introduced to a mysterious object called the Reactor. When Bob saw this reactor, he knew that this was technology that did not exist yet. When it was running, it created its own anti-gravitational field, which is impossible for us as human beings. We still don't have that technology. Prior to seeing this technology, everything Bob had read about this project, he approached with a level of skepticism. He thought that the government was just throwing things in this project to throw him off, saying crazy stuff, so that if there was a leak, they would know that this leak came from him. Now he knew that everything that he was reading was true. He said that he had read that this particular craft had come from a star system. He said he could never verify whether or not that that's true, of course, but that's what he read. Now, how they came up with the information that it came from this particular star, I mean, how did they know that? How do they know that? Anyway, there were no power buttons, there were no wires, there were no kind of gadgets of any kind that powered this thing on. It had the ability to deflect waves. So radio waves, this tiny little thing would produce so much energy. When it was powered on, it was cold to the touch. It wouldn't produce any heat. Anything that produces power will release small bits of wasted energy in the form of heat. This particular reactor didn't. One day he was able to take a look around inside of the aircraft. He describes it as all being this dark pewter color. It had this small little archway. Only in the center could he stand. It looked like it was built for little children. And there was these 3 rectangular boxes that looked like chairs that he assumed were for some kind of creature. They also had archways inside of this aircraft that could go translucent, and there were black boxes on the top portion that they assumed was for their navigation system. Bob said that you would think it'd be pretty exciting being inside this aircraft, but it was actually really creepy. It was an ominous feeling because you know that you're standing in something that is not of this world. There were no seams, there were no breaks. It was as if everything was fused together and it was all designed just like that. Once again, while in the aircraft, apart from the boxes and what they assumed to be the navigation system, there were no buttons, wires, nothing. One day when Bob went to work, they took him to the front of the hangar and he witnessed all of the hangars were open and you could see straight down all the hangars in the hangar that he was in. And there were 9 different spacecrafts, all shaped differently, all clearly not from this world, that other groups got to work on. Because this project S4 was so classified, there were different groups working on different things. All of it was separate. There was no cross-chatting, and they kept it that way for a reason. Supposedly, all 9 of these spacecrafts were powered by fuel known as element 15. Now, this was a stable element that at the time had not been discovered. It did not go bad and it was non-radioactive. Bob recalls a time where he and Barry were able to go outside and witness a test flight of this vehicle. He said it hovered off the air and emitted this light blue light. And then once it got a few feet off the air, you could hear nothing. It was silent. And it went from side to side before then dropping back down in the center. It was so cool, but he wasn't able to discuss it. You just witnessed and you went back to work. Of course, all testing was done at night so that there would be no eyewitnesses to what was really going on. When Bob started working for the company, he agreed to the highest level of surveillance and security clearance. Well, unbeknownst to him, the government was actually tapping his phone. They discovered that his wife was having an affair. Bob, of course, at the time did not know this, but he did know that things started to change. People started following him around at work. It seemed like the company was kind of distancing themselves from him, and he didn't know why. They were gonna let him go because they knew his life was about to end up in shambles. Bob is seeing these signs and he's like thinking, okay, something's going on. They're gonna let me go at some point, but he's like, well, I know all of this information. They're not just gonna let me go live a normal life. So for his own protection, he told a few of his friends what his job actually was, this top secret place working on this alien spacecraft. He told them as proof he would take them to one of their test flights. So when they had a test flight schedule, Bob took his friends out to witness this alien spacecraft being flown about in the night. Well, his friends, of course, were super amazed, and they went back again, and then they went back a third time, and then on the third time, he got caught. The day after their third encounter at the test site, Bob was called in to the office. Well, of course, they reprimanded him, and they were like, why would you ever release any of this information? We have to let you go. And at the same time, they told him about the fact that they knew his wife was having an affair. That's how he found out that she was cheating. Unfortunately, they did not let him go back to just living an ordinary life. They did end up allegedly erasing his entire existence. It was like Bob never even existed. After his employment there, he started working with a reporter named George Knapp to tell his story. Working with him proved to be a little bit challenging because they couldn't prove his existence. So George had to go back and forth with his former workplace. Then he found Robert Lazar's name in a telephone book, and then they reluctantly said, oh, yes, he did work here. There was also one pay stub from the Naval Academy. Other than that, everything that he knew was wiped clean. Now Bob kind of keeps a low profile and he doesn't do a whole lot. But 30 years ago, when this story first came out, until now, Bob has been telling the exact same story. His story has never changed. Obviously, he did get popular and he did get famous, but that was never his intention. His intention was to be a whistleblower and just let everybody know what's really going on. So guys, that is the story of Area 51 and Bob Lazar. I just thought it was so fascinating. What do you guys think? Do you think that Bob Lazar is lying? Or do you think that he's telling the truth? And we are not the only species in existence. Personally, I kind of think he's telling the truth. I think if he was gonna lie about something, he would lie about everything. There are plenty of times where he's like, you know, I can't verify that information, so I don't know. I think it's fascinating, I think it's cool, but I would love to know your opinions down below. So here's what I came up with. Here's a cute little craft. Basically, the top is a little light. You power it on. I hope you guys enjoyed kooky crafting with me. If you guys enjoyed this video, will you please do me a favor and give me a big thumbs up? I would truly appreciate it. All right, see you next time.